Hi, welcome to a collection of main things. And today we want to talk about the true versus truth thing. The difference between what is true and what is truth. This is a fascinating subject, and I've just enjoyed so much this going round and round in my mind and God speaking to me about this. You know, sometimes we read things so many times that we don't actually engage our brain. For if I was to say to you, for God so loved the world, in your brain you have gone on and the rest of the verse has gone on in your mind. And because we know a verse and we know how it goes, we think maybe we know the story that's behind it or the truth that's in there. And we tell ourselves we know the lesson from that. And I know from my personality and my upbringing, it's a bit of a no-nonsense farming kind of an upbringing. And I value things that are true, facts, the evidence. And that's the ultimate authority, because I'm like, you cannot argue with what is true. So if something is true, I'm delighted. And because it can't be argued against, it's rock solid and it can be relied on. So the statement, there's a bit of a saying, it says, God said it, I believe it, that settles it. It's very matter of fact. And it's been elevated a little bit to become a testimony of faith, that God said it, I believe it, that settles it, no more discussion, it's done. No questions, just total acceptance. And even if there was some nagging doubts in my mind, I would ignore it and I would say again, no, God said it, I believe it, that settles it. But when I read in the Bible, I find people there who had honest doubts, and they had the confidence and the courage to bring those to Jesus and to talk about it with him. And one of those is Thomas. Another one is the woman at the well. And, Thomas, we often call him Doubting Thomas. But what we see from his story is a classic example of someone who moved from what is true to the truth. And I want to unpack that a little bit so we can see the difference between what is true and what is the truth. A friend told me about an app, and it's called the Blue Letter Bible. And it's actually the Strong's Concordance on an app. And I've been having so much fun with it, and I know it's a sad life when a concordance creates excitement for you. But I want to take you on a journey that I went on, discovering the difference between what is true and what is the truth, because I thought they were the same, but they're not. The Greek origins of those two words, true and truth, is very interesting. And there's a story in John 4, it's actually the story of the woman at the well, that illustrates the difference between these words. Jesus connects with this woman in her ordinary day. She was just doing an ordinary thing on an ordinary day. She was out collecting water. And they chatted for a bit. But the aim for Jesus was for him to reveal truth to her. And at the beginning, she was stuck on what is true. And Jesus asks her for a drink, and she says, but you've got nothing to draw with. You haven't got a bucket. True. Facts, evidence, it's obvious. No bucket, it's true. And then he says to her, would you go and call your husband? And she says, I have no husband. True. Actual facts and evidence. Okay. So, but let's dig into this John 4 passage. If you've got your Bible there, have it open, because we're going to flick from some verses. But I want to start with talking about 3 different Greek words that are about true and truth. The first one we'll find, let's go to verse 16. Okay. And this is where Jesus says to her, go and call your husband and come back. And she says to him, I have no husband. And he says, you're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you've had 5 husbands. And the man you're with now is not your husband. What you have said is quite true. Okay, that's what Jesus said. And that word true, it means factual, evidence-based. It's just right and wrong. It's true. So he said to her, you've spoken what is true. You're absolutely right. And then she comes back to him with she says to him, sir, I can see that you're a prophet. If we go down 19, verse 19, 20, and she comes up with, our ancestors, they worshipped here, but the Jews, they worship here. Where's the right place to worship? And Jesus replies to her in verse 23, and he says to her, a time is coming when true worshippers, but this word, it means real, genuine, authentic worshippers, people who are sincere and really do want to worship. They are true worshippers, but it's a different word to the previous one that meant factual evidence. So Jesus said, a time is coming and has now come when true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. Third word. And this word truth, it means an experiential working out of what is true. So truth in real everyday life. And he says these are the kind of worshippers that the Father seeks. God is spirit, he says, and his worshippers must worship him in spirit and in truth. That experiential working out truth. So the woman, she answered questions about her personal life to Jesus with facts. She said, I have no husband. He says, true. That's right. And then she asks him about where's the right place to worship. And Jesus knows that she is genuine and sincere in her questioning. She was sincerely seeking the truth. It wasn't a smokescreen, and she did really care about the answer. She wanted to know the truth. And when Jesus replied to her and he said, I am the Messiah, she dropped everything and she ran back to the village to get people, come and see this man. He knows everything about me. He is the Messiah. And what astounds me is that people followed her. And you've got to remember, she was an outcast. She was at the well in the middle of the day to avoid people because she had a reputation in the village. She had 5 husbands and with a man who wasn't her husband. So she was an outcast. But when she goes back to that village with the truth, I have come and meet the Messiah, a man who told me truth, who spoke truth into my life. Despite what was true, all the evidence and the facts, Jesus spoke truth to me. And she said, come and see him. And the people followed her. Men from that village who would have judged her every day. Women in that village who would kept an eye on her. You stay away from my husband. They followed her. And the whole village went out to meet Jesus because this woman had experienced truth. A little bit further on in John, if you flick over to John chapter 8 and verse 32, Jesus is talking and he says, you shall know the truth and the truth will set you free. Okay? It's not what is true. What is true will not set us free. The truth, experiential truth from God lived out in my life, that is what will set me free. Not more evidence, not more facts in my head, but truth. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. These are all the same word. It's that experiential truth. The facts of Jesus will not change my life. Okay? But the truth of who Jesus is in my life is life-changing. Graham Cook said, the truth will set you free. What is true will keep you in therapy. And it's kind of right, because I have a choice. Am I going to live my life on the facts and the evidence? You know, I may be a victim of horrific abuse, and I'm not minimizing it at all. But the truth is, how does God see me? I am a child of God. I am loved and honoured and respected and valued by him. That's truth. And that is what will set me free. What is true? You know, the facts and the evidence, that doesn't take into account what is unseen or what is beyond my understanding. The reality of God doesn't fit with what is true. Yes, there's a list of things, there's a list of things of God that is true, but the reality in my life needs to be based on truth because God is truth. Jesus said, I am truth. There's an old hymn. It's called The Love of God. And it's making a comeback, and a group called Mercy Me have recorded this song on YouTube, this old hymn. And the lyrics, part of the lyrics of this song are, could we with ink the ocean fill, and were the skies of parchment made, were every stalk on earth a quill, and every man a scribe by trade, to write the love of God above would drain the ocean dry, nor could the scroll contain the whole, though stretched from sky to sky. The truth about God is infinite, and it's not possible for our finite brains to contain the truth of the infinite God. There's another man in the Bible who struggled with this, and his name was Pilate. And in John chapter 18, we read that Jesus told Pilate, I have come into the world to testify to the truth. You know, the experiential truth. Again, Jesus is saying, I am the truth. That's why I came into the world, to testify to truth. And Pilate said to him, what is truth? And Pilate was in the role of a judge. And in our courtrooms, we are fixated with what is true. It's all about facts that need to be presented and evidence that piles up, evidence of a crime, evidence of somebody being there. And in our courtrooms, it's all about what is true. And that was where Pilate was coming from, because he was in a position where he had to judge. It's not possible to argue with facts. And in the trial of Jesus, Pilate was acting as a judge in a matter of life and death. And he had nothing that he could confidently stand on that he said, this is true. It was just accusations. It was about who Jesus claimed to be and about who Pharisees said what he'd been saying. So when Pilate asked the question, what is truth? I believe he was looking for something more than just evidence and facts. Later, in the book of Acts, Peter has just had a dream about a whole lot of unclean animals that came down from the sky in a sort of a mat thing. And the angel said to him, eat these things. And it was a shock to him, because to him, these were unclean animals, and what was true was that the Jewish people didn't eat these. That was true. But he was beginning a journey to understand the truth that God loves Jews and Gentiles, and that he had sent Peter to save both. What a shock, because Peter was having a massive faith moment where he had to move from what he understood was true to this is God's truth, Peter. It's Jews and Gentiles. In Acts 10:34, Peter said, I most certainly understand now that God is not one to show partiality. Those words, I most certainly, in the Greek, they are, what he's saying is, I truth. In the Cambodian language, when people want to emphasize something, they say it twice. Like tom is the word for big. So tom is very big. Do it is the word for little. Do it is very little. And here Peter is saying, I, truth, understand that God is not one to show partiality. So he was emphasizing it. He really understood. As a child, I learnt verses that started with, verily, verily, I say unto you. It's the same kind of thing. This is emphasizing it. The truth, the big truth for Peter was to learn that God does not show partiality. He loves and accepts everyone. Peter had to move from what he understood was true and the facts and the evidence of everything he understood and had been taught. And he had to move to understanding the truth, that the Messiah had come for everyone. His ministry changed from there. His core values changed. And he became a Gentile-loving Jew who passionately and genuinely preached the gospel to them. And many were saved because Peter experienced the truth and he embraced it and he lived from it. We're just going to do one more example. And this is from the Old Testament. It's a guy called Gideon. And his story is found in Judges chapter 6 and 7. So let's look at his story in light of what is true and truth. Gideon is an example of someone who exchanged what was true in his life and embraced the truth about who God said he was. And if you read in Judges 6 and 7, you'll find a list there of things that were true about Gideon. The true facts for him was he was unimportant. He was fearful. He was a victim. So let's just go through it, okay? In verse 1, him and his family and his nation had been captive to a foreign power for more than 7 years already. True. He was scared of the Midianites. True. He was a victim of unfair practices. He had to work hidden so that the food that he was preparing could be for his family and not get stolen. True. He lived in a depressed economy. True. He was the least important member of his family. It was true. And his family was the least important member in the tribe. It was true. All of this is true. His family were Baal worshippers and had been for generations. True. And for Gideon to answer those two questions we talked about right at the start, who are you, Lord God? And who am I? All these things I've just mentioned about Gideon, he would have listed those. That's who he was. He was captive. He was scared. He was a family of Baal worshippers. All of it was true. But if Gideon makes a list about God, well, what is true about God? He would have known that God was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He'd been taught that as a kid. He would have known that what is true about God, he is the one true God. The Jews always talked about that Jehovah was the one true God. He would have known that their God was a judge. His story is in the book of Judges. And so Gideon knew this about God. There was a lot of things he knew that were true about God. But as we read through the story, we find God speaking to Gideon and speaking truth into him. And God says to Gideon, you are a mighty warrior. Now that goes against what Gideon knew was true about himself. God is saying, Gideon, the truth, you are a mighty warrior. Gideon, I am with you. This God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, this one true God, this judge, was saying to Gideon, the truth is, Gideon, and if you embrace it and receive it and live from it, the truth is, I am with you, you're a mighty warrior. And later on, God says to him, you are going to win this fight, and you are a leader, and people are going to follow you. But we've got to remember that what was true about Gideon, in his mind, he was the least important member. He was not a leader. He was not a warrior. But God said, Gideon, the truth that I want you to embrace in your life, how I see you, Gideon, this is truth. You're a mighty warrior and you're a leader, and I'm with you. And I'm not sure about you, but I want to live in truth. I want to be set free with truth. I want to live my life firmly on the foundation of truth. I want to experience God permeating my soul and my spirit and changing me to be one who lives in truth. How does God see me? We'll talk about that in another session. But right now, I choose both what is true and what is truth. I choose to experience the truth of God in my ordinary, everyday life. So what's the main thing? The main thing is what's true about me will not change me. Only truth, God's truth, has the power to change me. And truth is to be experienced. It's not something we just add to another list of facts in our head. Truth is to be experienced and lived out. So God is speaking to me. What's he saying to you?